The 2023 NBA playoffs are finally here after what has felt like a very long wait, and because of that, every major series that we're going to be seeing in this year's playoffs is going to be getting a series preview, and I am starting in the Eastern Conference with really the only interesting matchup in the East. Knicks versus Cavs. Who will win? Let's talk about it. Before we get to the end of this video, if you end up enjoying it, please be sure to subscribe to the channel and also drop a like so the video does better in the YouTube algorithm. I'm going to be trying to be uploading daily as the playoffs are around the corner, so your subscription and just being here, much appreciated. So, who are our fighters in this series? Well, let's start with the New York Knicks. The Knicks in the past have hung their hat on defense, but this year it has been much more about the offensive side of the ball. This year they finished as the third best offensive team in basketball, at least according to offensive rating, and just 19th on defense. Now, post All-Star break, they dropped down to 4th in offense, but up to 16th in defense. The bump in defense could probably be primarily attributed to Josh Hart, who is very impactful on that end and probably almost definitely the best perimeter defender or defender period on that team, so that's definitely worthy of note. That addition was late and probably makes their defense better than what we knew it to be in the regular season. But as a whole, this is an offense first team with fairly mediocre middle of the pack defense. The boost offensively this year can primarily be attributed to the addition of Jalen Brunson, who averaged 24 points per game on 60 true shooting this year. He also developed a fantastic relationship with Julius Randle, who is much better than he was last year, and I do think he should be much better than he even was the year that they made the playoffs. The major concern I have with this team, as good as they are offensively, is how they actually get their offense. This is the most heavy ISO-centric offense in the entire league by far. This team is at the bottom of the league in assisted field goals, and by extension, of course, that means that they are first in non-assisted field goals. Isolation-heavy offense historically does have issues in the playoffs. A lack of dynamicism in the offense makes it a lot easier to defend and a lot easier to predict. While obviously having a dynamic offense is important just for the sake of having multiple options in your offense, it's also important for the sake of making your opponent's defense really work, making them move. If you just have an offense where everybody's standing there and one player is playing one-on-one, that is giving the defense a break. They basically get to sit there and catch their breath, wait for the shot to go up, and they have all the energy in the world they need for the offensive side of the ball. So, in a way, having a dynamic offense can actually benefit your defense just from a stamina management standpoint. And having this offense that is so cookie cutter, so basic, it has that factor. And then, of course, it's also really easy to defend. Even if you have a player who is phenomenal in isolation, ultimately, a one-on-one play is easier to defend than a play involving multiple players, pretty much inherently. If there's multiple players, switches might need to happen. You might have to move at all. So that's important. And not having those dynamics of the offense, obviously that's not something Tom Thibodeau's ever been known for. It's definitely far from ideal. If you're going to be an ISO-heavy offense, it's best to have elite scorers doing so, like in the past, like the Houston Rockets with James Harden, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving on the Nets, Kevin Durant's OKC Thunder, just as some examples. And you'll take note there that looking at those examples, those are teams that ultimately did not go all the way. If you take a look at teams that are known for being really ISO heavy, there's really none that win championships. So even though the Knicks are a very good offense in the regular season, I don't know how well that's going to translate to the playoffs. As mentioned, with those elite scorers, do we consider Jalen Brunson to be an elite isolation scorer? I mean, maybe, but especially Julius Randle and RJ Barrett, I don't think they're on that tier. I'll leave open that possibility for Brunson, but Julius can have his shooting slumps, and RJ Barrett is practically known for his shooting slumps at this point. Randle is the biggest area of concern in general. As you may recall, in the 2021 playoffs, Randle shot less than 30% from the field versus the Hawks. When NBA defenses really queue up on Julius Randle, his scoring starts to look really, really funny in the light. So I don't like the foundation the Knicks have offensively, even if it has undeniably worked in the regular season. But on the flip side, let's talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers. They are the #1 defense in the league and 9th on offense. Post All-Star break, they are still 9th in offense, but they did fall to 8th on defense. Mind you, the difference in their defensive rating post All-Star break was just 3 points, because there's just a lot of great defenses this year. Just dropping 3 points moves you all the way down the ladder, but I'm still quite confident that this Cavaliers defense is going to be very, very elite in the postseason. Now, despite being ranked lower than the Knicks in offense in the regular season, I actually feel better about how Cleveland's offense works, even if it yielded lesser results than what the Knicks got in the regular season. This Cavs offense features a wild concept called teamwork and passing the ball. Now, I'm not saying this is some amazing passing offense. This is not the beautiful game here. They are middle of the pack in assists, but it's definitely better than being at the very bottom of the league, and their offense has far more dynamicism to it than what the Knicks have. I also trust in their shooting a little bit more than with New York. For New York, I really only trust Brunson and Quentin Grimes to shoot the ball. And I guess for the Cavs, I also feel that way about Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, because after those two, the shooting's not ideal. But at least in the case of Garland and Mitchell, I like that shooting more than what Brunson and Grimes are bringing to the table. And also very notable, they have a player that is capable of superstar level offensive production in the playoffs. That player, of course, being Donovan Mitchell. There's really no question to anyone with much reason who the best player in this series is, and also there's no question who here elevates their game in the playoffs the most significantly. It's Donovan Mitchell, and having that factor is really, really important for postseason success. I think one of these teams has a player capable of playing at superstar level, and the other doesn't, and it's not good for the team that doesn't. Now, after saying all of this, you're probably getting the impression that I am leaning towards the Cavs here. And that's because I am. But I'm not necessarily putting all my eggs in that basket. I don't think it's like a guarantee by any means that the Cavaliers are going to win this series. Otherwise, I wouldn't be making this video in the first place. And the reason why I'm not just going to outright say the Cavs have this is if you take a look at the regular season matchups, there is some interesting stuff there. The Cavs and Knicks have faced off 4 times this year, and in those 4 games, the Knicks have won 3 of them, with an average score between these two teams being 109 to 105. So let's actually take a look at these games and see what we can learn to maybe help New York's chances a little bit here. Some noteworthy pieces of context for these games. In the game that the Knicks actually lost this year, Evan Fournier played like 30 minutes, was a key part of the rotation. He's not in the rotation now, so that wasn't exactly helpful, and he was a big minus in that game. Jarrett Allen missed their game in December, and neither Julius Randle nor Jarrett Allen participated in the March game where Jalen Brunson had 48 points. Here are the season series averages for the key players in both of these teams' offenses. Darius Garland seems to struggle a bit, Donovan Mitchell doesn't at all, and Julius Randle seems to be relatively unaffected by the Cavaliers' defense, but if you actually look at this a little bit more closely, it does look a little fishy. The best game that he had of the 3 that he did have was a 36-point performance where he hit 8 3-pointers, which is just a huge statistical outlier for him. Obviously, he's been a good 3-point shooter on high volume this year, but 8 threes is kind of ridiculous. And if you were to remove that game, just take a look at the other 2 performances he had versus the Cavs this year, excluding that one, he averages 16.5 points on 44% true shooting. That is less than ideal. But let's actually take a look at some of the film from these games for further evidence. And I do want to make a quick disclaimer here. I am aware that regular season basketball is not necessarily going to translate the same in the NBA playoffs. In fact, it all but certainly will not. However, at the same time, I promise you that both of these teams are watching the film from their regular season, trying to learn what they can to create whatever advantages they can. There's stuff to be learned based on how these teams match up in the regular season, even if it's not going to translate 100%. One thing I really wanted to look out for going back and watching these games is how Julius Randle handles the Cavs defense, because to me, the Cavs have a perfect defense to stop Julius. Evan Mobley's length and defensive instinct should make it hard for Julius to get his contested jump shots that he likes so much off. Obviously, he already takes contested jumpers all the time, but having that extra bit of length that the average NBA defender very much does not have means it's going to be a lot easier for Evan Mobley to bother those shots. And while, of course, there is a little bit of a weight difference between Randle and Evan Mobley, I don't know that it's enough that it's really going to make up for the difference in length, as well as the speed that Evan Mobley has to recover if he does make a mistake. I don't think Randle's really going to be blowing by Evan, and if he does, he has the length and, again, the speed to recover. But let's say that Julius Randle does manage to get by Evan Mobley, does manage to shake him off, well, then he's probably going to have to deal with Jarrett Allen waiting for him in the paint. So one way or the other, you're leaving one great defender for another great one that you have to worry about. So it is my theory that Julius Randle should struggle in particular against this Cavaliers defense. How does that work out in the footage? Well, of course, taking a look at his 36 performance, of which 24 of his points came from the three-point land, Mobley did an all right job getting out there and contesting his threes. There were a few times where Mobley's tendency to try and be a rim protector did have him being a little sucked into the paint a bit more, which would make it easier for Randle, who was on fire at that point, to get a little bit more space. And I do think that there is some concern that Evan Mobley might not be willing to step out on the perimeter as much as he truly needs to defend Julius. But when you take a look at his other games, it gets really rough. It reminds me quite a bit of watching Julius Randle versus the Atlanta Hawks in the playoffs 2 years ago, which of course is not ideal. And my theory, for the most part, pretty much holds up, excluding that outlier game. Now, in fairness to the Knicks, unlike in the Hawks series, they have something to fall back on. They have Jalen Brunson now, and the Cavs' biggest hole defensively comes from the guard position. And in the March game between these two teams, Jalen Brunson had easily the best performance of anybody between the two, having 48 in the absence of Julius Randle. So how did Jalen go off like this, and what does it tell us about how he will be defended in this series? Well, to put it simply, he pretty much just pick and rolled them to death. Frankly, Donovan Mitchell is the primary culprit for how much Jalen went off in this game. It would usually be him and Evan Mobley defending the pick and roll, and Mitchell's defense was so poor that a switch was actually far more ideal. I think the result when Evan Mobley was guarding Jalen Brunson was much better than an actual guard guarding him. Mitchell's defense was so bad that what is on the surface and kind of was a mismatch would ultimately be better for the Cavs defense. And because it's a guard versus a big, as good as Evan is defensively, Jalen was able to use his speed and his manipulation to just get open looks and enough space to also, frankly, hit a ton of heavily contested mid-range shots. So I will throw that there in the Cavs' favor, that he was making some ridiculous shots. But in general, I do think Jalen Brunson has the easiest chance of anyone on New York to have a really great series. As for how New York defends Cleveland with Mitchell, they easily found their most success with Josh Hart defending him. I think that's for sure their go-to matchup, and Immanuel Quickley also did an immaculate job whenever he was defending Darius Garland. I actually think New York is fairly well equipped to defend those guys. I expect Mobley and Allen will have to step up offensively at times. Now, by contrast, I will mention that for both Mitchell and Garland, they had a fairly easy time whenever guarded by Quentin Grimes. I'm not saying Grimes is a bad defender. In fact, I'm actually a pretty big fan of him as a player in general, and he's fine defensively. But for whatever reason, neither of them were remotely bothered by him, and I think you're going to want to go with IQ and Hart as your primary defenders. As for some quick notes here about non-matchup related things, if I was the Cavs, I would try and limit Caris LeVert's role as much as possible. He has Dylan Brooks syndrome, aka he thinks he's like the best player on the team half of the time when he very much is not. His numbers versus the Knicks this year are pitiful: 7 points and 5 assists on 42% true shooting, getting 25 minutes per game. He has been pretty excellent in his last 11 games or so of the regular season, so there's a chance he can contribute well, but I worry about him interrupting the flow. And on the Knicks side of things, I wouldn't be surprised to see them favor Isaiah Hartenstein over Mitchell Robinson at times. Mitchell was a complete non-factor offensively in the 3 games that he played. He was a -7 in 2 of those games, and Hartenstein is more capable as a finisher and just really good in the pick and roll. And while Mitchell is a better defender, I don't think he's a game-changing level defender enough to justify how much he doesn't do on offense, so Hartenstein might get a little bit more run there. Neither of them are ideal center options, frankly, but at the very least, they both rebound well, and if you don't play a center, you're gonna get killed on the glass. I do worry about the depth of shooting for both of these teams. As I previously mentioned, I trust Brunson, Grimes, Garland, and Mitchell. That's about it. So there's definitely going to be nights where both of these teams have rough shooting nights. As for my prediction, I don't think I'm shocking anyone by picking the Cleveland Cavaliers. Obviously, I made a video on why I thought they would be the dark horse of the playoffs. But New York has a chance here, especially if Julius Randle, unlike what I think, doesn't actually struggle that much. I would probably predict that this is a 6-game series. If Julius really struggles, a 5-game. If not, maybe it goes to 7, and hell, there's a chance the Knicks win. But yeah, my official prediction is Cavs in 6. I hope you noticed that I was trying to go more in depth with my commentary here, so let me know what you thought about it, as well as what you could add, because as much as I did try to cover all my bases, you can't really cover all of them. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and goodbye.